Have you ever watched your boss stride onto stage, basking in applause for work that cost you countless sleepless nights and silent tears? Have you ever swallowed your rage while the person who dismissed you as worthless crumbled in their own power game? This isn't just another tale of workplace betrayal. This is a chess match where a woman once deemed invisible flipped the board with patience, brilliance, and a $320 million ace up her sleeve. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold, it's served with surgical precision and a patent number. My name is Emily Carson, and for 7 years, I was the ghost in the machine at Helix Point Systems, a telecommunications tech giant sprawled across 3 glass towers in downtown Chicago. You know the type, the one who arrives at 6:30 a.m. when the office is still dark, who knows every line of legacy code that holds the entire infrastructure together, who gets pulled into emergency calls at 11:45 p.m. because the servers are hemorrhaging data and nobody else knows how to stop the bleeding. I was 28 when this story begins, though I felt ancient in tech years. My desk sat in the corner of the 14th floor, strategically positioned where the overhead lights flickered just enough to give you a headache by noon. No window view. Of course, those were reserved for people like my boss, Richard Hale, whose corner office could have housed a small startup. Richard. Even now. Typing his name makes my jaw clench. He was 43, silver-foxed in that calculated way where you knew he touched up the gray at his temples to look distinguished. He had this habit of rolling up his sleeves exactly 2 folds during meetings, like he was about to dig into real work, though I'd never seen him write a single line of code. His superpower was appearing at the exact moment a crisis was resolved, usually with a fresh cup of coffee and a concerned expression, ready to take it from here when the executives arrived. The office culture at Helix Point was what you'd expect from a company that put synergy and disruption in the same mission statement. We had ping-pong tables nobody used, kombucha on tap that tasted like fermented disappointment, and motivational posters featuring mountains and eagles that seemed to mock us as we worked 70-hour weeks. But the real culture, the one that mattered, was simpler credit flows upward, blame flows downward, and people like me existed to make people like Richard look competent. Everyone knew Richard's game. During our Monday morning stand-ups, he'd ask for updates on our initiatives, his initiatives being whatever I'd fixed over the weekend. He had this gift for rephrasing technical solutions in executive speak. I'd spend 3 days debugging a memory leak that was costing us thousands in cloud services, and Richard would stride into the C-suite meeting talking about optimizing our resource allocation through strategic infrastructure refinement. My colleagues saw it. Sarah from DevOps once slipped me a coffee with a note. We know who really saved the product launch. Tom from security sometimes gave me these pitying looks when Richard presented my penetration testing results as his comprehensive security audit. But knowing and doing something about it were different beasts entirely. Richard had been at Helix Point for 15 years. He played golf with the CTO. His kids went to the same private school as the CEOs. He was untouchable, and we all knew it. I wasn't invisible by choice. I spoke up in meetings, submitted detailed reports, even tried scheduling skip-level meetings with Richard's boss. But there's this special kind of invisibility that happens to women in tech, especially those who refuse to play the game of fake laughs at bad jokes and strategic incompetence to make insecure men feel smart. I fixed things. I built things. I kept the lights on. But in the official narrative of Helix Point Systems, I was just another engineer. Interchangeable, replaceable, forgettable. The breaking point came during a company all-hands meeting. Richard was presenting quarterly achievements, and there, on slide 7, was my entire network optimization project 6 months of my life, presented as Richard Hale's innovative approach to system architecture. He even had the audacity to explain my own algorithm, badly, getting the key concepts wrong while 200 employees applauded. I sat in the back row, my fingernails digging crescents into my palms, and made a decision. If I was going to be invisible, I'd be invisible with purpose. The cuts started small, almost surgical in their precision. Richard had this way of making you feel worthless while maintaining plausible deniability. During code reviews, he'd lean back in his Herman Miller chair, the one that cost more than my monthly rent, and say things like, "Emily's approach is interesting, though I wonder if someone with more experience might handle it differently." The pause before interesting was deliberate. loaded with doubt that spread through the room like a virus. In front of the engineering team, he'd ask me to explain basic concepts, things a first-year computer science student would know. "Emily, why don't you walk us through what an API is? I want to make sure everyone's on the same page." The condescension dripped like honey, sweet and suffocating. The other engineers would shift uncomfortably, knowing this was theater, but nobody challenged him. He was management. I was labor. The quarterly performance review was where he truly excelled at his craft. I'll never forget sitting across from him in conference room B, the one with the broken air conditioning that turned it into a greenhouse by 2 p.m. Richard had my review printed out, all 2 pages of it marked up with red ink like a failed exam. "Your technical skills are adequate," he began, that word adequate hanging between us like a slap. "But I'm concerned about your soft skills. You don't seem to be a team player. Several people have mentioned you're difficult to work with." "Which people?" I asked, knowing he'd never answer. He smiled that shark smile of his. "That's confidential. You understand. But the perception is there, and perception is reality in this business." The review continued with surgical strikes, my successful database migration that saved the company $2 million annually, competent execution of assigned tasks, the machine learning model I developed that improved customer retention by 37%, shows promise but lacks strategic thinking, every achievement diminished, every contribution minimized. But the moment that would echo in my mind for months came during the Q3 planning session. We were discussing team expansion, and someone suggested hiring additional senior engineers. Richard actually laughed and said, "If Emily quits tomorrow, the system might hiccup for 5 minutes before I could hire a contractor for half the price. Hell, we could probably just get an AI to do most of what she does." The room went silent. Even his usual enablers looked uncomfortable. Sarah's mouth fell open slightly. Tom studied his laptop screen like it contained the secrets of the universe, but Richard just sipped his oat milk latte, pleased with himself, while I sat there feeling my face burn but keeping my expression neutral. "That's an interesting perspective, Richard," I said, my voice steady as steel. "I'll keep that in mind." He waved dismissively. "Don't take it personally, Emily. It's just business. We all need to understand our value proposition." Value proposition. I started documenting everything after that. Every dismissive email, every public humiliation, every stolen idea. I kept a journal, encrypted and backed up in 3 locations. Richard's words became evidence, his actions building a case he didn't know was being prosecuted. The pattern was consistent. He'd assign me impossible deadlines, then express disappointment when I merely met them instead of failing. He'd schedule critical meetings during my pre-approved vacations, then note my absence as lack of commitment. He'd forget to include me in important email chains, then publicly wonder why I wasn't staying informed about team initiatives. My favorite was when he presented my cost-saving automation script to the board, the one I'd built on weekends using my personal laptop as an example of the innovation I've been fostering in my team. He got a 5-figure bonus for that innovation. I got a 2% cost of living raise and a reminder that I should be grateful for the learning opportunities. I smiled through it all, nodded at his suggestions, thanked him for his feedback, let him think he was breaking me down, wearing me out, pushing me toward the exit he clearly wanted me to take. But every insult, every slight, every stolen moment of glory was fuel. I was building something in the shadows, something he couldn't see, couldn't steal, couldn't diminish. Richard thought he was playing chess while I was playing checkers. The truth was, I wasn't even on his board anymore. I was building my own game, with my own rules, and he'd already lost. He just didn't know it yet. The idea came to me at 3:27 a.m. on a Tuesday, sitting in my cramped studio apartment with 4 monitors glowing like electronic altars. I wasn't working on Helix Point problems. I'd learned to draw that boundary after my 3rd unpaid all-nighter. This was something else, something that had been percolating in the back of my mind for months. The telecommunications industry was drowning in data redundancy. Every company was using variations of the same bloated optimization protocols, bleeding money through inefficiencies nobody wanted to admit existed. But what if you could create an algorithm that didn't just optimize the data flow, but fundamentally restructured how data packets were prioritized and compressed in real time? not just faster, smarter. I started coding on my personal laptop, a beat-up ThinkPad I'd bought with my own money specifically to keep my work separate from anything Helix Point could claim. Every line of code was mine, written in my apartment, on my time, using knowledge I'd accumulated over a decade in the industry, knowledge that predated my employment at Helix Point by years. The breakthrough happened 6 weeks later. It was elegant in its simplicity, the kind of solution that seems obvious only after someone shows it to you. My algorithm could reduce data redundancy by 68%, while actually improving transmission speed. In an industry where a 2% improvement was considered revolutionary, this was like discovering fire. I ran the test 17 times, certain I'd made an error, but the numbers held. The code was clean, efficient, beautiful in that way that only engineers understand, like watching a perfectly balanced equation resolve itself. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, feeling that rare euphoria of creation. This wasn't just good, this was paradigm shifting. The smart move would have been to quit Helix Point immediately and develop this independently, but I needed the steady paycheck, at least for a few more months. So I made a different choice. At 7:45 a.m. that morning, I filed a provisional patent application with the USPTO, my name only, my home address, my personal email. I paid the filing fee with my personal credit card and saved every receipt. The provisional patent was my flag planted on virgin territory. It established my priority date, proof that on this day, at this moment, this invention was mine. I had 12 months to file the full patent, 12 months to build on the foundation I'd laid. The application was deliberately vague in some areas, specific in others, enough to protect the core concept without revealing all my cards. Meanwhile, at work, I became even more careful. I never accessed my personal algorithm from Helix Point computers, never discussed it with colleagues, never even hinted at its existence. But like all secrets that want to be told, pieces of it began to leak into my subconscious work. During a brainstorming session about network optimization, I accidentally mentioned a concept related to my algorithm, just a fragment, a theoretical possibility. Richard's eyes lit up like a predator spotting prey. Interesting idea. Emily, why don't you explore that further? It's just a theory, I backpedaled. Probably wouldn't work in practice. But the seed was planted. Over the next few weeks, Richard kept circling back to that concept, pushing me to elaborate, to develop it using company resources. I played dumb, acted like I couldn't quite figure out how to make it work. It was Oscar-worthy performance art watching Richard grow frustrated with my apparent incompetence while sitting on a solution that would revolutionize the industry. The cosmic joke was that Helix Point started developing a new product based on the fragment I'd let slip. Richard assembled a team, brought in consultants, burned through a $2 million R&D budget, trying to reverse engineer something from a shadow of an idea. They got close enough that their product would actually infringe on my patent once it was granted. But they never got the elegant solution, never understood the underlying principle that made it all work. I watched from my corner desk as Richard presented progress reports to the executives, his chest puffed with pride over his vision for the future of data optimization. The entire time, the real solution sat encrypted on my personal laptop, protected by a provisional patent that was slowly, quietly making its way through the USPTO system. 3 months before my provisional was set to expire, I filed the full patent application, complete documentation, 47 pages of technical specifications, drawings, flowcharts, and enough detail to make it bulletproof. My patent attorney, yes. I hired my own with my savings, called it one of the most comprehensive applications he'd seen. The patent was published 18 months after the original filing date, as per standard USPTO procedure. By then, it would be too late for Helix Point to do anything about it. They were already committed, already building their product on a foundation that belonged to me. They just didn't know it yet. Every night, I'd come home and refine my work, improve the algorithm, build proof-of-concept applications. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about creation, about building something that nobody could take from me, something that would outlast Richard's ego and Helix Point's stock price. The patent was my insurance policy, my weapon, my Declaration of Independence, all rolled into one. And the beautiful irony, Richard himself had pushed me to explore the concept further. In every future legal document, his own words would prove that the invention was mine, developed independently, merely discussed theoretically at work. I was playing a long game now, measured in legal filings and patent claims rather than quarterly reviews. Richard thought he owned me, owned my ideas, owned my future. He was about to learn that ownership, like respect, had to be earned, and he'd failed on both counts. The end came on a Thursday at 2:30 p.m., right after the lunch rush when the office was in that post-meal stupor. I'd seen the meeting invite the night before, quick sync, Emily, Richard, HR. 15 minutes allocated, conference room C, the one they used for terminations because it was farthest from the main floor, less chance of a scene. I wore my best blazer that day, the navy one I'd bought for interviews I never went to, put on makeup for the first time in months. If they were going to execute me professionally, I'd look good for the firing squad. Richard was already there when I arrived, lounging in his chair like a king holding court. Margaret from HR sat beside him, her face arranged in that practiced expression of corporate sympathy, concerned but distant, like she was watching a sad movie she'd seen before. The termination packet was already on the table, face down, trying to be discreet. "Emily, please sit," Richard said, gesturing to the chair across from them, the defendant's chair. I'd always called it, "I'm afraid we need to discuss your future with Helix Point." I sat, crossed my legs, and gave them my full attention. Of course. Margaret cleared her throat, launching into the script. "Emily, we've made the difficult decision to eliminate your position. This is purely a business decision, part of our Q4 restructuring. Your termination is effective immediately." "I see," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "And my severance?" 2 weeks, Richard interjected, barely suppressing a smile. "Standard for your level. You'll need to return all company property today, and security will escort you to clean out your desk." The silence stretched for a moment. Then Richard leaned forward, unable to resist twisting the knife. "I want you to know, Emily, this isn't personal. You're a decent programmer, but Helix Point needs team players who can think strategically. Maybe at your next job, you'll learn to be more collaborative." I nodded slowly, as if absorbing his wisdom. "Thank you for the feedback. Richard, I'll definitely keep that in mind." Margaret slid the packet across the table. "We'll need you to sign these documents. The non-disclosure agreement is standard, as is the non-compete clause. You cannot work for any direct competitor for 12 months. I read through every page, taking my time, letting them fidget. The non-compete was broad but focused on employment. It said nothing about licensing intellectual property. My lawyer had already reviewed a similar document and assured me I was clear. "Everything seems to be in order," I said, signing with a flourish. Richard's smugness was practically radioactive. "Don't forget to clean out your desk thoroughly. Oh, and Emily," he paused for effect, "don't forget that little cactus on your desk. Make sure you ask facilities management before taking it. Wouldn't want you accused of stealing company property." The pettiness of it, a $5 succulent I'd bought myself, was so perfectly Richard. I smiled, genuinely this time. "Of course, I'll be sure to follow proper procedures." The walk to my desk with security felt like a funeral procession, colleagues averting their eyes, some offering subtle nods of sympathy. Sarah looked like she wanted to say something but didn't dare with the guard hovering. I packed my few personal items into a cardboard box, the cactus, a coffee mug, a photo of my mom. Left behind were 7 years of work, documentation, code that would break within 6 months without maintenance only. I understood. As we reached the elevator, Richard appeared for one last performance, loud enough for everyone to hear. He said, "Best of luck. Emily, I'm sure you'll find something more suited to your skill level, maybe a nice help desk position." The elevator doors closed on his grinning face. The security guard, an older guy named Marcus, who'd always been kind to me, muttered under his breath, "That man's an asshole." "Yes," I agreed. "He certainly is." In the lobby, Marcus broke protocol. "You were the only one who ever fixed things around here," he said quietly. "They're going to regret this." "Sooner than they think," I replied. Outside, Chicago's October wind cut through my blazer, but I didn't feel cold. I felt electric. They'd just freed me from any lingering loyalty, any residual doubt about what I was about to do. My provisional patent had been converted to a full application 8 months ago. The patent had been granted last week. The official documents were sitting in my apartment, beautiful embossed seals and all. Richard thought he'd destroyed me with his casual cruelty, his calculated humiliation. He thought that little cactus comment would be the detail I'd remember, crying into my wine tonight. But what I'd remember was the exact moment he sealed his fate leaning back in that expensive chair, telling me I needed to think more strategically. Strategy. He had no idea what that word really meant. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I'd saved months ago but never called. Victor Langston, intellectual property attorney, former patent examiner, and according to my research, the kind of lawyer who made corporate legal departments wake up in cold sweats. Mr. Langston, this is Emily Carson. I believe we have a mutual interest in discussing some intellectual property that's about to become very relevant to Helix Point Systems. Yes, I can meet this afternoon. I just became unexpectedly available. Victor Langston's office occupied the 42nd floor of a building that screamed old money and older power, the kind of place where partnerships were dissolved and empires were divided with equal precision. His receptionist offered me Ethiopian coffee in actual china while I waited, a far cry from Helix Point's paper cups and burnt Keurig pods. Victor himself was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of the shark in Armani I'd imagined, he looked like a favorite professor, wire-rimmed glasses, slightly rumpled shirt, and a genuine smile that reached his eyes. His office walls were covered not with vanity photos, but with framed patents, including one for the intermittent windshield wiper that had resulted in a legendary David versus Goliath case against Ford. Ms. Carson, he said, shaking my hand firmly, I've been expecting someone like you for years. Tech company. I'm guessing stolen work termination, just when things got interesting. All of the above, I said, settling into a leather chair that probably cost more than my monthly salary. But with a twist. I laid out my documents like playing cards, the provisional patent filing, the granted patent certificate, printed emails showing Richard pushing me to explore concepts related to my algorithm, Helix Point's public announcements about their revolutionary new optimization system, and finally, technical comparisons showing how their product directly infringed on my patent claims. Victor read in silence for 20 minutes, occasionally adjusting his glasses or making notes on a legal pad. Finally, he looked up, and his professorial demeanor had shifted into something sharper. This is beautiful, he said, tapping the patent. Not just the algorithm, though, that's impressive, but the documentation. You've built an airtight case. They're not just infringing. They've built their entire next-generation product on your intellectual property. Can we stop them? I asked. Stop them? Victor laughed, a sound like expensive whiskey. Ms. Carson, we're not going to stop them. We're going to let them run full speed into a brick wall of their own making. Every day they continue developing this product, every dollar they invest, every client they promise delivery to it, all increases your leverage. He pulled out a fresh legal pad and began sketching out a timeline. The patent was granted last week. Publication will happen within a few days, standard USPTO procedure. Once it's public, Helix Point will have constructive notice that they're infringing. Every action they take after that point becomes willful infringement, which means triple damages. Triple. At minimum. But here's where it gets interesting. He leaned forward, his eyes bright with strategic pleasure. You're not bound by any employment agreement that would assign this patent to them. Correct? You developed it entirely on your own time, with your own resources. Every line of code, I was careful. Brilliant. Now, Helix Point has two choices once they discover this. They can try to license the technology from you expensive and humiliating, or they can try to fight the patent's validity. Given that you have documented proof that you developed this independently, and that Richard himself encouraged you to explore these concepts after you'd already filed your provisional, that second option would be inadvisable. He stood and walked to his window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. But there's a third option, one that would be particularly satisfying given your circumstances, which is, we offer the exclusive license to their biggest competitor. Let the market do what termination paperwork started. My heart rate spiked. Orion Dynamics. Exactly. They've been trying to catch up to Helix Point for 3 years. Your algorithm would not only level the playing field, it would tilt it entirely in their favor. And the beauty is, once we grant them exclusive rights, Helix Point can't use the technology at all. They'd have to scrap their entire product line or face an injunction. The audacity of it took my breath away. Not just revenge, complete annihilation of Richard's career-defining project. Victor returned to his desk, pulling up a document on his computer. I'll draft a cease and desist letter to be sent to Helix Point the day after the patent publishes. Simultaneously, we'll approach Orion with an exclusive licensing deal. Given what's at stake, I'd estimate the licensing fee in the range of... He wrote a number on a piece of paper and slid it across the desk. I had to read it 3 times to believe it. 300 to 350 million, I whispered. Conservative estimate, this technology could save them billions over the next decade, plus the strategic value of keeping it from Helix Point priceless. And my fee? I asked Victor. 30% of the licensing deal. Standard for a case this strong. But Emily, he looked at me seriously. This is going to get ugly. Helix Point will come at you with everything they have. They'll try to claim you developed this on company time, that you stole trade secrets, that the termination was justified. They'll try to bury you in legal fees. Let them try, I said, thinking of Richard's smug face, of that cactus comment, of 7 years of diminishment. I've got nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Victor smiled, the kind of smile that probably terrified opposing counsel. Then let's sharpen the knives. We have a patent to weaponize, and a very expensive point to make. He pulled out a bottle of Japanese whiskey from his desk drawer, pouring 2 glasses. To David, he toasted, and to Goliath's spectacular fall. We clinked glasses, and I savored the burn, somewhere across town. Richard was probably celebrating my termination, maybe taking the team out for drinks on the company card, laughing about how he'd finally gotten rid of dead weight. Enjoy it. Richard, I thought, enjoy every second, because in 72 hours, when the patent publishes and our letter hits your desk, you're going to understand what strategic thinking really looks like. The call to Dana Caldwell at Orion Dynamics was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after my termination. Victor had done his homework. Dana was their VP of Product Strategy, MIT graduate, former Tesla engineer, and according to LinkedIn, she'd been vocal about Orion's need to innovate beyond incremental improvements. I dialed from Victor's conference room, with him sitting beside me taking notes. The phone rang twice. Dana Caldwell, came a crisp, no-nonsense voice. Ms. Caldwell, my name is Emily Carson. I'm calling about a patent I hold that directly impacts Helix Point's new data stream optimization system. There was a pause. I'm listening. I have legally granted patent rights to an algorithm that reduces data redundancy by 68% while improving transmission speed. Helix Point's entire next-generation product line infringes on this patent. I'm offering Orion exclusive licensing rights. The silence stretched for 5 seconds. Then, how do I know this is legitimate? Patent number